He thought her silence meant absence, but silence is not emptiness. Silence can be a throne, and she is seated upon it. The man who once believed he held dominion over her emotions suddenly finds himself disoriented, as though the ground beneath him has shifted. What he mistook for weakness becomes revelation, and his ego begins to crumble under the weight of what it cannot control. For in the economy of human desire, rejection and silence are not voids, they are currencies of sovereignty. In the masculine psyche, shaped by centuries of conquest and external triumphs, the greatest terror is rejection. The primal wound whispers, "You are not enough." This fear stalks every man, hidden beneath the armor of bravado, beneath the carefully rehearsed confidence. When a woman embodies rejection, not from cruelty but from sovereign clarity, she touches the rawest nerve of his unconscious. Jung would call this an encounter with his shadow, a mirror of his inadequacy, the unfinished battle within himself. And yet the feminine wound is of another shape. Where the man fears rejection, the woman often fears abandonment. She is told from the earliest whispers of culture that her survival, her safety, her worth rests upon being chosen. She learns to please, to soften, to remain silent not as power but as appeasement. So when she dares to sit upon silence as throne, when she dares to say no with the unflinching gaze of the queen archetype, she is not only rejecting him, she is rejecting centuries of inherited submission. Her silence is not his punishment, it is her liberation. This is the paradox. His ego collapses at the very moment her sovereignty rises. He trembles not because she speaks, but because she does not, because he cannot fill the space she leaves. The queen archetype reveals herself in this space, regal, unhurried, unbending. She does not scream, she does not beg, she simply remains, and in remaining she exposes his dependence on her response, his hunger for validation, his frantic need to be mirrored as significant. Picture this, he sends a sharp remark designed to provoke her into laughter or protest. She does not take the bait. She does not laugh, nor does she scold. Her eyes meet his with calm detachment, then turn away into silence. The room shifts. He feels suddenly small, like a boy who has lost his mother's approval. The joke curdles in his mouth. What he experiences is not mere social awkwardness. It is regression into the very wound of insignificance, the terror of not mattering. She has, without a word, exposed the hollowness of his power. Do you see what happens here? Her silence becomes a mirror, and what he sees in it is not her emptiness but his own. Rejection, when wielded by the sovereign feminine, is not cruelty, it is clarity. It separates the man who seeks to possess from the man who dares to honor. It filters pretenders from the worthy. The queen knows that her silence is a crown, and she wears it not for spectacle but for survival. And you, do you dare to sit in that throne of silence? Or do you rush to fill the space with apology, with nervous laughter, with explanations that erode your dignity? The truth is, silence is terrifying only when you fear abandonment. Once you know that you are never abandoned by yourself, silence becomes sanctuary. It becomes weapon. It becomes song. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the greatest power is self-possession, to be unmoved by what is outside one's control. Seneca taught that insult and rejection wound only when we agree to be wounded. The sovereign woman practices this philosophy not with stoic coldness, but with archetypal majesty. Her silence is not withdrawal, it is presence distilled to its essence. It is the refusal to perform for approval, the refusal to dance for scraps of validation. Tonight, sit in silence for just 5 minutes. No music, no phone, no chatter. Listen to the throne beneath you. Feel how silence holds, how it steadies. Notice the discomfort that arises, the itch to speak, to move, to appease. That is the shadow of abandonment whispering, "Stay seated, stay sovereign." The silence that unnerves him is the silence that will heal you. When the ego of a man meets silence, he first mistakes it for weakness. Then when silence does not break, he senses danger. It is as though he has struck a wall that will not move, a mirror that refuses to bend. The masculine psyche, shaped by pursuit, thrives in conquest and chase in eliciting response. Rejection and silence cut into this structure like a blade, severing him from the illusion of control. Suddenly, he is no longer the hunter. He is the one being measured, weighed, found unworthy. His ego begins to fracture, because silence is a force he cannot dominate. But look closer. This collapse is not only about her refusal, it is about his unconscious need for her reflection. A man can endure many defeats, but to be unseen, unheard, unacknowledged by the feminine gaze, that is unbearable. Jung would say he has projected his anima, his inner feminine, onto her. And so her silence becomes more than a rejection from a woman. It feels like abandonment from the soul itself, as if the very source of his emotional oxygen has been withdrawn. For the woman, the story runs differently. She has been conditioned to soften every edge, to fill silences with warmth, to fear that absence will drive him away forever. The feminine wound whispers, "If you do not please, you will be left." And so she apologizes, she explains, she accommodates. She learns to dread rejection because it mirrors her terror of abandonment. But when she rises into sovereignty, when she embodies the queen who sits still upon her throne, she discovers that silence can heal this wound. She learns that being left does not mean being diminished. She learns that absence is not the end, it is the beginning of her reign. Imagine a moment. A man leans closer, confident in his charm, expecting her to melt. His words drip with practiced seduction, but she hears the hollowness beneath them. She does not reply, her eyes steady, her posture unmoved. The air thickens. He feels the heat of rejection not through an insult, not through anger, but through the weight of her refusal to engage. For the first time, he tastes the bitterness of insignificance. His ego scrambles for footing, but there is nothing to grip. Her silence has stripped him bare. And yet the paradox deepens, for as his ego collapses, a strange transformation begins. If he is willing, the silence calls him inward. Without her response to cling to, he must face the mirror of himself. He must ask, "Who am I when she does not affirm me? What remains when applause is gone, when conquest fails, when validation is denied?" Silence, then, becomes not only her weapon but his potential teacher. It drags him toward individuation, toward the painful but necessary task of owning his shadow, of meeting his insecurity without demanding her to soothe it. This is why rejection in its sovereign form is not cruelty. It is initiation. It is the queen drawing a boundary, saying, "Here, you will not pass unless you know your own worth." She is not punishing him. She is purifying the encounter. The men who crumble and flee reveal themselves as boys still ruled by the hunger for mother's endless approval. The men who rise are those who dare to meet her silence not with panic but with presence. And you listening now must ask yourself, do you fear your own silence? Do you rush to explain, to soothe, to rescue his ego from collapse? Every time you do, you betray your throne. Every time you rush into sound, you hand him the crown of your sovereignty. But if you remain still, if you let the silence do its work, you will see the truth of who he is and of who you are becoming. Seneca once said, "If you wish to be loved, love yourself first." This is not vanity but sovereignty. To love yourself is to refuse to sell your worth for crumbs, to know that silence is not a void but a temple. When you sit in it, you rise beyond the wounds of abandonment. You no longer beg to be chosen, you choose. Tonight, when you feel the urge to explain, to send another message, to break the silence with noise, pause. Place your hand on your chest and remind yourself, "Silence is my crown." Feel the throne beneath you. Let him wrestle with the weight of absence. His ego may collapse, but in that collapse, truth emerges. And you, steady, sovereign, will still be seated. The ego does not collapse in a sudden crash. It crumbles in layers as silence continues to deny it nourishment. At first, he grows impatient. He tests her boundaries with small gestures, messages left unanswered, jokes that fall into the void, invitations that receive no reply. Then comes the confusion. Why does she not respond as others do? Why does she not scramble to secure his presence? This confusion stirs irritation, and beneath irritation lies the fear he cannot name, the fear of insignificance, the fear that without her reflection, he is no one at all. What she holds in that silence is not merely absence but power. The queen archetype emerges fully here. She does not withhold out of cruelty but out of discernment. A crown does not bend to every request. A throne is not moved by every plea. Her silence is not empty space. It is filled with presence, filled with the unshakable knowing that she will not betray herself just to soothe another's wound. For him, rejection reopens the primal wound, the sense of being unworthy of love. He has spent years layering over this wound with conquest, with performance, with masks of charm or dominance. But when she refuses to mirror him, the mask begins to slip. Jung would call this the confrontation with the shadow, the parts of himself he hides even from his own awareness. The boy who was ignored by his father, the adolescent who felt invisible in the crowd, the man who quietly doubts his own strength. Her silence CES him into this confrontation, whether he wishes it or not. And yet the feminine carries her own wound into this encounter. Silence is not easy for her. Centuries of conditioning whisper, if you do not please, you will be left. If you do not soften, you will be unloved. The queen archetype rises only when she breaks this chain, when she dares to sit unmoved while the old fear screams inside her. Every time she remains in her silence, she heals a fragment of that wound. She learns that she can be left and still live, that she can be rejected and still reign. That her worth is not determined by his acceptance, but by her own being. Picture this. A man confesses his interest, expecting gratitude, expecting her eagerness to affirm. Instead, she looks at him with calm clarity and says a simple no. Not harsh, not apologetic, just sovereign. He blinks, waiting for her to soften it, to explain, to leave a door open. But she does not. She holds the space with dignity. His ego recoils, feels the sting. And yet in the depths of that sting, something profound occurs. He is invited, perhaps for the first time, to stand without a woman's affirmation propping him up. She does not diminish him. She simply refuses to play the game of feeding his hunger. You who listen now, do you see the gift hidden inside rejection? It does not simply wound, it awakens. It awakens him to his dependency on external validation, and it awakens you to your sovereignty. Rejection and silence, when held with dignity, become acts of initiation. They separate the true from the false, the worthy from the unready. They call both the masculine and the feminine to rise beyond their wounds. Marcus Aurelius spoke of the stillness within as a fortress that cannot be broken by another. This stillness is what she embodies when she refuses to collapse into noise. In her silence, she becomes untouchable. Not cold, not cruel, untouchable because she does not barter her worth. Her throne cannot be shaken by his disapproval, nor does it inflate with his praise. She sits steady, knowing that her crown was never his to give. But here lies the challenge for you. Can you sit with the discomfort of silence without rushing to explain? Can you hold a no without softening it into a maybe? Can you let his ego collapse without running to rescue it, without stitching his wound with your energy? Every time you rescue him from the collapse, you abandon yourself. Every time you sit still, you reclaim yourself. Tonight, when you feel the pull to compromise your boundaries for his comfort, pause, breathe. Remember the throne, remember the crown. Imagine silence wrapping around you like a cloak of velvet. It is not absence. It is majesty. It is the queen within you speaking without words. The silence becomes unbearable to him because it denies him his usual weapons. Words cannot pierce it. Charm cannot sway it. Even anger bounces off of it like arrows striking stone. The man who has built his identity on eliciting reactions finds himself stripped of his stage. Without her applause, without her protest, without her submission, he faces the void of his own unhealed self. And so, his ego collapses, not because she harmed him, but because she refused to carry his unfinished burden. For centuries, men have been taught that conquest secures their place in the world. A man who wins is a man who matters, but conquest only has meaning when the conquered responds. The silence of the queen nullifies the entire game. It tells him, your worth cannot be proven by possession, not here. Your tricks, your dominance, your validation seeking, they fall silent before me. This is not just rejection of him as a suitor. It is rejection of a pattern as old as history. It is the queen tearing down the stage on which the old masculine ego performs. And yet the silence does more than collapse him. It heals her. Because each time she refuses to fill the void with apology, she untangles herself from the ancient feminine wound, the terror of abandonment. She proves to herself again and again that she can be left and still remain whole. She can say no and still be worthy. She can be silent and still be radiant. With every act of sovereign rejection, she breaks another chain of inherited submission. Imagine this scene. A man raises his voice, hoping to overwhelm her with dominance. The air trembles with his projection of power, but she does not match his volume. She does not beg, does not placate. She simply looks at him once, calm and unyielding, and turns away in silence. The room shifts. His rage ricochets against the walls and collapses back upon him. What terrifies him is not her anger, but her refusal to invest energy at all. He has been denied the mirror, denied the stage, denied the endless game of power. And in that denial, the boy within him trembles. Jung would say that the queen archetype embodies the principle of containment. She does not scatter her energy outward in frantic gestures of approval seeking. She contains it, holds it, sanctifies it. Silence becomes her temple, rejection her incense, dignity her altar. And from this temple she rules, not by chasing, not by shouting, but by being unmoved. You may not yet realize the gravity of this. To reject with dignity, to remain silent in sovereignty, is not just an act of self-protection. It is an initiation for both. It forces the man into shadow work he would otherwise avoid. It forces the woman into sovereignty she would otherwise abandon. Rejection is not an end. It is a beginning. Silence is not emptiness. It is presence distilled to its most potent form. Do you feel how hard this is? To not soften your no, to not break the silence with nervous chatter, to not bend your crown so his ego can stay upright. This is the real trial of sovereignty. The queen is not sovereign because the world affirms her. She is sovereign because she does not betray herself even when the world withdraws. Seneca once wrote, "He who is brave is free." In silence, in rejection, the queen becomes free. Free from the compulsion to soothe. Free from the chains of abandonment. Free from the game of proving her worth through his recognition. And in that freedom, she becomes radiant, magnetic, not because she seeks to attract, but because she is unshaken in her own presence. And will you dare to test this freedom? Will you risk his collapse for the sake of your throne? The boy in him may rage, the man in him may retreat, but the queen in you must remain steady. Every time you hold the silence, you teach him that love is not conquest, that presence cannot be demanded, that the crown is not granted by him. It is already yours. Tonight, sit with this image, a throne carved not of stone but of silence, a crown woven not of jewels but of self-respect. Each time you choose not to explain, not to beg, not to break your own dignity, you polish that crown. Each time you let rejection stand clear and sovereign, you ascend further into the archetype of the queen. There comes a moment when his collapse deepens into something more raw than anger or confusion. It is the moment he realizes that her silence cannot be manipulated, that her rejection is not a temporary storm but an immovable climate. His ego has no foothold. He stands before her throne like a supplicant stripped of all offerings. And in that moment, he feels the unbearable weight of insignificance pressing against his chest. For a man whose identity was built on conquest, this is annihilation. Yet, paradoxically, it is also the only soil from which his true self can grow. This is the alchemy of silence. What seems like emptiness is in fact transformation. Jung taught that the collapse of the persona, the mask we wear to survive, marks the first step toward individuation. When she refuses to mirror his performance, his mask shatters. He faces the boy he once was, the fears he never resolved, the hollow spaces he filled with pursuit and conquest. Without her affirmation, he is cast into his own underworld. And though it burns, though it humiliates, it is there that his shadow awaits him. But notice this, her silence is not an act of cruelty. It is an act of sovereignty. The queen archetype is not a tyrant, not a destroyer for the sake of destruction. She is order, boundary, sacred clarity. Her rejection does not say, "You are worthless." It says, "You will not find your worth in me." She closes the door not to diminish him but to protect her own temple. This distinction is everything. She refuses to carry the fragments of his unhealed ego, and in doing so, she frees herself. For the feminine, this is also initiation. To hold silence is to battle the oldest fear, abandonment. Every fiber of her conditioning urges her to break it, to soften, to fill the gap with reassurance. But when she resists, when she remains seated on her throne, she learns the truth. That absence does not annihilate her. That abandonment cannot undo her crown. That being left does not mean being emptied. Each act of silence reinforces her sovereignty until it is no longer performance, but essence. Picture this, he sends one last message, desperate, laced with both charm and bitterness. He waits, the screen stays still, no reply, the hours stretch into days, his mind races through anger, longing, confusion, and then silence swallows him whole. In that silence, he sees his dependency laid bare. He realizes how much of his sense of power rested on her willingness to respond. Without her, he must confront himself. Without her, he must build his own throne. And you, what throne are you building? Do you still hand your crown to those who fail to honor it, begging them to validate what is already yours? Or do you sit in silence, unbending until the unworthy fall away? The throne is not built by being chosen. It is built by choosing. By choosing not to betray yourself for comfort, not to soften your no into a maybe, not to break. Act your silence to ease another's collapse. The philosophers knew this truth long before psychology gave it language. Epictetus taught, "It is not things themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about them." Silence rewrites judgment. It teaches that his rejection does not define you, nor does his validation complete you. Silence is the space where you meet yourself, where you dissolve the illusion that your worth depends on him. This is the paradox. In rejecting him, you reclaim yourself. In refusing to soothe his ego, you soothe your own wound. In silence, you do not abandon, you become unabandonable. For the woman who sits upon the throne of her silence knows this. She cannot be left behind, for she does not leave herself. So let tonight be your practice. When the urge to explain burns, when the fear of losing him scratches at your chest, place your hand on your heart and whisper, "I am not afraid of silence." Sit with it as though it were a sacred fire. Let it warm you, let it crown you. Let him wrestle with his collapse. It is not yours to fix. The throne is yours and silence is its foundation. Hold it, guard it, reign from it. The throne of silence does not merely protect, it transforms. Over time, he begins to realize that her refusal to break the silence is not about punishment, nor about cruelty. It is about truth. The masculine ego, so used to bending the world with force and charm, discovers that neither can move her. And when neither force nor charm succeed, a revelation dawns. What he seeks is not her submission, but his own wholeness. Her silence, though it feels like rejection, is actually a summons. A summons into his own shadow, into his own unfinished initiation. But notice the tension. Most men resist this call. They grow restless, angry, or retreat into pride. The collapse of the ego is humiliating, and humiliation feels like death. Yet for the man who dares to endure it, the silence becomes medicine. He begins to see that her refusal to respond forces him to stand without crutches. He must stop leaning on conquest, on external affirmation, on the illusion of control. If he survives the silence, he emerges lighter, truer, more real. For her, this same silence becomes a sanctuary. Each time she refuses to bend her boundaries, she heals a little more of the ancient feminine wound. She discovers that absence does not devour her, that rejection does not erase her worth. Every time she does not reply, every time she holds her no, she sits deeper into her throne. She becomes the queen, not because she has conquered him, but because she has mastered herself. Picture this, he tries again, this time not with arrogance, but with vulnerability. He admits his fear, his longing, his confusion. Her silence holds steady, not cold, but clear. He is forced to meet the tremor in his own voice, to see how much of his hunger for her was really hunger for himself. He begins to sense that love cannot be demanded, that presence cannot be possessed. The silence teaches him what no lecture could, that the crown cannot be stolen. It must be earned. And what of you? How often do you betray your crown for the comfort of pleasing? How often do you abandon your throne to chase after a man who is not prepared to meet you in sovereignty? Each time you silence your no, you chip away at your crown. Each time you fill the void with apology, you step down from your throne. But when you remain still, when you allow rejection and silence to stand tall, you reveal a truth deeper than attraction. You reveal sovereignty. Jung would say that this is individuation, the process of becoming whole, of withdrawing projections, of owning the self fully. The queen embodies this by refusing to act as mirror for his unhealed shadow. She will not carry his fragments for him. She will not stitch his ego back together at the cost of her dignity. Her silence tells him, your healing is your own task. Your wholeness is your responsibility. I will not betray myself to rescue you. The philosophers, too, understood this. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "It is not death that a man should fear, but never beginning to live." For him, her silence is death, the death of ego, the death of illusion. But beyond that death lies the possibility of life, of authenticity, of real connection not built on conquest but on presence. For her, silence is life. The reclaiming of her own being, the beginning of a reign that cannot be toppled by abandonment. Do you dare to hold this silence? Do you dare to reject without explanation, to say no without apology, to sit upon your throne without lowering yourself to soothe his collapse? This is not cruelty. This is courage. This is sovereignty. Tonight, when you feel the urge to soften your boundaries, imagine the throne beneath you. Close your eyes and see the crown of silence upon your head. Each moment you choose dignity over fear, silence over apology, rejection over betrayal of yourself. You step deeper. Antio, the queen. The woman who knows her worth does not chase, she chooses. And in her silence she is untouchable.